Perfect. Right, guys, so thank you very much for tuning in. This is Josh Bardsley from the Entrepreneur Vlog. I am with Brad Sugars. Hi, Brad.
G'day, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction, and then we'll head on right into it, if that works.
That'd be fantastic.
Perfect. So Brad is the chairman of ActionCOACH, the world's #1 business coaching company. And I think ActionCOACH is probably one of the most decorated franchises in the world. We have a very close affiliation to it here at Avalanche. And as you can see next door, we actually share an office space with them. Brad has bought, started, built, and sold many, many businesses, and is the author of over 15 books and has taught hundreds of thousands of people over the world across the last couple of decades. So today we're going to get into the nitty gritty and talk to Brad a little bit about his earlier career and then ask some questions and sort of dive into it. So if we could start right at the beginning, Brad, let's talk about your entrepreneurial seizure. So Michael Gerber talks in his book about the entrepreneurial seizure. And I'd love to know when, or if you could pinpoint it, when yours was.
Well, I think about 7 years of age. You know, it's interesting when you think back about when you decided to work for yourself. Some of us decide really early on. In fact, you know, the interesting thing for me is a lot of people decide to work for themselves, but then don't actually do it. And it's like they go and get a job, even though they're like, I know I should be working for myself, but I've still got a job, and I'm still going to work the job because I don't feel secure enough to work for myself, and they don't make the leap. And it's like, you know, one of the greatest things for you is you're exposed to entrepreneurialism early in life. And so it was a natural step for you to just go and do that. And I think for me, natural thing. So I don't know if I had a seizure or if it was just always part of me. But I think for most of us, especially young people, I think the best thing about starting a business when you're young is that you're young enough and naive enough to realize that you don't know everything. The problem with people when they're, you know, I'm 45, almost 46. When I meet people my age that want to start a business, it's like they assume they already know everything because they've had a job for a while. And it's like, look, having a job doesn't qualify you to be in business. You've got to learn business from the ground up. And the earlier you start, the better off it is.
Absolutely. I remember you talking about a milk round situation with your dad at a party one day, and he said, how does you explain the story, the milk round story?
Yeah, it was a friend of my dad's. He was our milkman. And, you know, it was interesting because we went to his house and he had this big, beautiful house. And you don't expect a milkman to be rich. You know, this is a guy that every day runs your bottles of milk into the house. Now, I know we don't have that anymore, but you know, you sort of sit there and you think, how did he become rich? And it was the difference between being an employee and being a business owner. You know, you build capital value when you own the business. You don't just build income. And so that's where a lot of people sort of, you know, didn't get it, but just small, like normal, boring businesses that there's just, you know, it's like there's so many millionaires. And if you read The Millionaire Next Door, they did, it was here in the US, they did a survey of, I think it was 4,000 millionaires. And most of them had, more than 70% of them, it was they owned their own business. That was first and foremost. And second of all, most of them had boring businesses. They didn't have, you know, fancy, you know, they didn't found Facebook or anything. They sold shoes, or they did paving, or they did locksmith stuff. You know, it's boring businesses. But when I say boring also means it's the things that people want to buy every single day. You know, I keep going back to a point of when you hear people say things, you know, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's complete. I'll be nice. It's just not true, because if you do what you love, you'll work 10 times harder than anybody else out there in the marketplace. So, you know, start a business selling things that other people want, not selling things you love. You know, that's the craziness. If you sell what you love, doesn't mean there's a million customers out there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that many people make a mistake. They do something because they really, really like it. They start a coffee shop because they like coffee, and they don't realize what or if there's a marketplace for it in their current situation. It's very interesting.
Yeah, people seem to have this theory that if I can do amazingly good coffee, then everyone will come from all over the place to buy it. And it's just generally not the case. You got to have a good built-in customer base. So
from that point, what would you say was your first, you know, real life business? I think you started Action quite young. sort of early 20s, but what was your first real life business, would you say?
You know, I mean, everything from pizza manufacturing was one of them, and clothing business. We had all sorts of different things when we first started out. And I guess what I learned from each of them was that each business is an apprenticeship for the next one. You know, you're going to make a mistake in some businesses. Like I think I was about 16 or 17. I tried my hand at network marketing, and people, you know, it's like, well, network marketing is an amazingly good training ground for you. You might not make a bunch of money out of it, but at least you'll learn. Some people do make a bunch of money out of it. But it was learning sales, and it was learning all of the different, and marketing and team building and all of those things that you have to learn to be good at business.
Very interesting. So with that in mind then, so you did start Action, what age were you when you started Action Coach? 21, 22?
I was 21 or 22.
So that business was pretty damn early on in the self-development movement. Did you realize that was going to be such a crazy wave back when you first started Action?
You know, when I first started Action Coach, it was because people were asking me to go and speak. And you know, people were saying, you're young and successful, come and teach us what you've been doing. And so I started speaking, and I didn't really at the time think of it as a business until it kept going. And then every time I'd speak, people would ask me, well, can you help me? And I said, well, I don't have time to consult. I don't have time to do all that stuff. I'm running my own businesses, and I'm doing this speaking stuff. But you know, call me once a week and I'll try and coach you and teach you what I do. And amazingly enough, we started. And when I sat down and wrote the vision of the company, when I actually decided, yes, I'm going to do this seriously, I'm going to make it a big business, and I wrote the vision of world abundance through business re-education, you know, it changed a lot for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think that you mentioned that people like Jim Rohn and all those big titans of, you know, early self-development were, or especially Jim Rohn was a big mentor to you. You know, what was that? Was that you went to his seminars, that kind of thing? What was your experience with Jim Rohn?
Buddy, I went to every single seminar that was on in my city. If there was a seminar on, I was there. I read every single book. Like every week I'd go to the bookstore and find another book, read another book type thing. It was just consistent. I immersed myself in learning for many years because I knew the fact that, you know, I teach it today that if you want to out-earn me, you got to out-learn me. You know, and the level of learning is a key indicator of someone's success. So, yeah, I went to Jim. I went to every single seminar I could get my hands on, basically. If I went to a seminar and they were selling another one, I'd be the first one up to buy it. If they were selling a pack of DVDs and, in those days, tape sets, I'd be the first one buying. So,
So I remember the learning aspect of it is really interesting for me, especially because I'm an avid reader, and I think that quite a lot of this audience love learning as well, and we talk about it all the time. But we're kind of finding is that the more you learn, the more sort of quite random but quite decent situations you get yourself into, just because your mindset's there or your vision's there. You know, you mentioned, I think, that you ended up speaking with Robert Kiyosaki, or you got brought by Robert Kiyosaki to do something. What happened there?
Yeah, I was attending a seminar that he was actually teaching called Powerful Presentations, How to Present from Stage. And, you know, long story short, they did an exercise where they broke it up into men and women, and you had your dress and your power suit and all that sort of stuff. And they said to all of the women, go and stand in front of the guy you'd take home to mum and dad. And then, no one lined up in front of me. Go and stand in front of the guy that you wouldn't take home to mum and dad, but you'd take home. And no one stood in front of me. Now go and stand in front of the guy who you would hire to run your $200 million a year business, who did have a $200 million a year business. And her and a bunch of other women stood in front of me for hiring someone to run your business. And I think I was 20 or 19 or 20. And Robert brought me up on stage, and he said something along the lines of, you older guys better watch out, because if you don't watch out, this guy's going to, take your spot and beat you, and there's no two ways about it. And I turned to Robert and I said, and when I'm finished with them, Robert, I'm coming after you. And he laughed and had a bit of a giggle. And then afterwards he said, I want to take you to lunch. And so we sat down for lunch, and he took me to Hawaii to teach at his business school for entrepreneurs. And I went to Phoenix and helped coach him in his business. And
that's cool.
Yeah,
cool
time. And these days, his partner in writing that book, Sharon Lecter, we still work with her a lot at Action Coach.
Yeah, she's at Global, isn't she? She's at Global this year in Vancouver.
You're speaking at our conference in Vancouver, yes. It's our wealth conference. Each year we run one for wealth. So
yeah. Well, I think I actually got to meet Robert and Kim in October. Ended up being their stage manager because I volunteered to work there, and ended up having a good conversation with them. And they're very nice people. Kim is a very, very nice lady. Very smart, but still at it. They're still on it. They love to talk about property and real estate, don't they?
Yeah, look, when I think most good teachers do it because they love it, and that's where you get guys like Robert and Brian Tracy and Jack Canfield, and these are guys who are still, I think Brian Tracy's must be in his 70s, but he still wants to be on stage every day of his life. He just loves it.
It's wicked. So back onto the early part of Action. And so I was Unplugged in November, and if anyone does want to go to that, if you're doing another one, then just let us know, Brad, because I think that we'll share it to these audiences. That was a really, really, really good day for me. And one of the things we touched on was the 30% versus 30x mindset, and the 100. Don't start or buy a business or build a business unless you can take it to $100 million. So that kind of mindset, where did you sort of, in the beginning, obviously you had Action Coach. You could have had a nice lifestyle with Action Coach, coaching businesses. We see it all the time, but you decided to franchise it and get it leveraged. So how did that sort of mindset come about, or was that always there?
Well, I think it starts with, I sat down and wrote the vision, and, a lot of people when they start a business are looking to do nothing more than pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And if your goal of business is to pay the bills, then that's all it'll ever do. I forget who it was that taught it, but someone once taught me that you're only ever as big as your competition. So if your competition is the bills, then that's as big as you get. If your competition is the guy down the street, your competitor, then that's as big as you get. If your competition is changing the world, then that's as big as you get. See, for me to achieve world abundance through business re-education, I couldn't do it on my own. I learned that the hard way. I mean, I was out there was 2 years early on where I was literally in hotels and on the stage more than 200 days a year. So I literally had 20 seminars or hotel stays, and it was just like at the end of those 2 years, it was like, okay, this is not working. This is not fun. So nowadays I do 38 events, and that's it for the year, and keeps me in balance.
Cool. So so you obviously went through, was it Australia first, then New Zealand, then the rest? When did you sort of start to break into the US? What was that?
Asia, then US, then Europe. But and I don't want to get away from it, that in the early days it took 7 days a week, 12 16-hour days. Yeah. Too often I meet young people that start a business and they kind of want to have a lifestyle business before they've even built the business. It's like, I know my definition of a business is build a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without you, but that's not day one. It's not year one. It's like year 7 onwards. I mean, Action Coach was 10 years old before I put a new CEO in to run it for me. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of it. So I think a lot of people have got to get to that point of understanding that you've got to work a ton in the beginning. I always say, if you opened a restaurant, farms, being there 7 days a week and working 10, 12, 16-hour days, I don't understand why in other businesses people think it's different. They think it's easier or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember reading one of your books. You said in the beginning it's a 100-hour week, but if you implement the stuff that we teach you and you get someone to work with you on the way, then you can get that down to the 4-hour work week, as Tim Ferriss would say it.
Tim's 4-hour work week is an interesting philosophy, but to be
honest, as an entrepreneur, you want to work. Yeah, exactly.
The 10-hour work week, it probably wouldn't have sold as many copies.
I agree. I think it's very interesting.
The philosophy of the 4-hour work week is a good philosophy, but it won't happen if you want to build something that's global and massive type thing. You can definitely make enough money to live in a 4-hour work week, but you can't build something massive and global, because see, people need they need a visionary, they need someone who can take them on a path. And it's impossible to be a leader if you don't know the goal. I meet business people and they don't have goals, and I say, well, how do you score? you can't win. So the game of business is partly about winning. So I think
you're always sort of trying to, again, like you said earlier, that this business is always the apprenticeship for the next business, and you're always going to get bigger and bigger in your mindset. And especially as an entrepreneur, you just want to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think it's really important, the point you touched on earlier with, they don't have to be the next tech billionaire. They can build, bread and butter businesses and then turn them into global enterprises. I think that's a really important mindset to install in people, because there's a big fad around starting something that's going to be $1 million raise in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, living here in Las Vegas, I look at Zappos just down the road from us, and here's a couple of young guys that bought a business that was no revenue, but they sold shoes, and this is where people get a little over anxious about all the technology stuff and forget that everyone buys shoes. I'm negotiating right now to buy a hair salon chain, barbershops basically. And there's this. I'm going to buy out of the business. They've got 40,000 stores across the US. I'm going to look at buying about 1,500 of them. But you sit down and you look at it and you just say, yep, everyone needs a haircut. It's not complex. It's like when you try and sell something that nobody buys yet, it's hard. You've got to convince the market. There's a reason I just bought an alcohol company in the UK, because everyone buys alcohol. I bought a vehicle importing company down in Australia because everyone buys cars. I just bought a business down in Texas, or a share of a business down in Texas that does property management. And why? Because everyone needs a house. I try and get into businesses where everyone needs it. It's like, if you want to go into a good business, what's a good business? Bottled water. How come? Everyone drinks water. And for some stupid reason, we've been convinced to drink them out of bottles and cups.
Yeah, I get that. That's an interesting business to be in. Find a spring and make it some crazy new ass water. That's great.
It's just a brand. You look at, when you take a look at Vitamin Water and Smart Water, there's a company that they sold to Coca-Cola for billions, and what do they got? A fancy looking bottle with Jennifer Aniston holding the dang thing, and Vitamin Water. Get your vitamins in your water. Smart Water. How smart are you got to be to spend that much money on a bottle of water when you can go to the tap? It's like, but genius businesses, guys, and this is the thing. I go back to what you mentioned, the 30% versus 30 times. We don't get involved in a business that we can't see it at 100 million a year. We just don't. It's not worth our time. Now, in the beginning, geez, I didn't get involved in a business I couldn't make 10 grand out of. It was like, that's part of the whole thing of life, is adding zeros at some point. Keep adding zeros. Sorry, I got a phone going off in the background.
That's right.
So yeah, keep adding zeros is probably the big thing.
It's evolution, yeah. Well, talking of I think Smart Water trying to take over the UK at the moment. They keep coming in with their predatory pricing and undercutting everyone. So Coca-Cola are doing something right there. So with that in mind, Brad, I think that it's very interesting to probably talk about brands moving into different countries. And I read part of your book the other day when I was rereading him, and you talked about your no fear experience. And how I wanted to talk about this because it's really interesting, especially for someone who's maybe taking an opportunity or being offered a big opportunity. Could you explain a little bit more about that for us?
Well, what happened was I was looking at a deal, and this early on when I was looking at deals, sometimes basically what ended up happening is I talked myself out of the deal, and you get to 80% of the way on any particular deal, you get about 80% certain. And you're not going to get more than 80% certain. You're going to get about 80%. You can't get to 100% certainty on a deal. And what happens at 80% certainty is you start trying to talk yourself out of the deal. You start looking for that one thing why shouldn't I do this type stuff? And you start hunting. And even though you've got 100 reasons to do it, if you look hard enough for a reason not to do something, guess what? You'll find it. And that's what I did, and I found it, and the bloke that bought it to Australia made tens of millions, and I remember keeping a no fear sticker on my car for many years because I just to just remind myself of how stupid I was to talk myself out of it. So my advice to people when they're looking at deals like that is two things. Number one, there's two emotions that come up when you go for a great deal, and that is fear and excitement. The challenge is most people let fear win most of the time. They don't try and have, they don't let excitement win all that often. So that's a big challenge. The second one is that when you get to 80% of the way there, pull the trigger. Whether it's a yes or a no, pull the trigger. Don't keep looking for 100% certainty. You see people look for, they're looking for the perfect business. No such thing.
It's not there, yeah.
There's no such thing as the perfect opportunity. There's the opportunity that's in front of you right now. Do your evaluation, make a decision, go. That lesson, General Norman Schwarzkopf, I remember him speaking a couple of times, and he was the leader of Desert Storm and Norman, and he said, two things that I've really picked up from him. One was, when placed in command, take charge. Really take charge. Don't just be in. It's like, if you're put in charge of a business, grow it. A business is either growing or dying. If you're in charge of it, grow the dang thing. Don't just run it. Running a business, keeping it status quo is crazy. You got to grow the thing. But the second thing I learned from him is, you're better off to make a decision and do something than do nothing. And that's where most people end up. They don't make a decision, therefore they keep doing the same thing over and over again and wonder why they never get any different results.
Yeah, I think again, it's fantastic. I think it's really important to learn that at such a young age as well, because you're going to start firing deals at you as you guys grow and do business, and you do more learning. You find yourself in these situations where, if you just keep looking for deals, you can end up just keep looking for deals. You're not going to do any deals. You find a business and make it perfect by doing your own thing in there. And if that's
well, even you mentioned real estate earlier. It's like the number of real estate investors who just keep looking. They've never made an offer. It's like, if you don't make an offer, you aren't going to do it. So making offers is part of the deal, and having the gumption to make good offers is where we make most of the money.
Yeah, so on that point, then, obviously, Billionaire in Training, talk about three sort of main areas where one can create wealth and one can create passive income to, eventually be able to financially retire and then do, either retire or do something else. So the three areas are obviously business, real estate, and stocks. So I just want to talk about a couple deals in, mostly business and real estate, because I think that's where most people here on this video are, and then maybe touch on stocks down the line. But what's kind of been your favorite or best business where you've bought and you've built it and then you've sold it, that kind of thing?
Look, best deal is the next one you do. That's sort of the thing. But I look back at, in business, and what you're looking for in any of these is a wholesale. Sorry, I have to turn that phone off. What you're looking for in any of these is a wholesale deal. So how do you get a wholesale deal rather than a retail deal? Now, what do I mean by that? When you go and buy something, so let's use shares as an example. When you go to the stock market, you go and buy a share. If you're buying a single share, you pay retail price for it. You can't get a discount of it. You go and buy a house, and you're buying a single house usually, and you don't know what you're doing. You'll end up, you'll pay full price for it type thing. So that's buying at retail. The goal is to make a profit on day one, and that's where. So what we try and do in business is do a deal where we buy the business for less than it's worth. Now, in most cases, you can do that because the person selling. A lot of time in business, people are in such a need to get out that they're willing to take a loss just because they're sick of running the business. They're just done. And so those sorts of things come up. So. These days I don't usually buy those types of businesses anymore. I buy businesses where I see them, they're good and I want to make them great, or they're a good business in a local area and I want to take them international type thing. But those early on businesses, it was just buying turnaround companies. And, the number of small deals that I did where I just buy it and turn it around, it was a lot of fun. I mean, that's sort of what it was. So I'm looking for something with, I wouldn't say I'm looking for something where the whole thing needs doing, like real estate. I remember the first wholesale real estate deal I did where there was a developer who had developed 13 apartments and he'd sold 6 of them and 7 were left there for sale. And he was desperately in need of money to do his next development. And he'd put a deposit on some land and he needed the cash immediately. So it was like, well, okay. I just worked the deal out where I bought them for basically what it cost him to build them, and he went without the profit because he needed the cash to go into these next deals. So you do deals like that, but again, you've got to hunt for them. I mean, doing business deals, you're 60 to 100 even before you find a good deal, and that's where people are a bit lazy. They take they might look at 10 deals, and because they've only looked at 10 deals and they pick the best of 10, and it might be an okay deal, doesn't mean it's a great deal. You know? And that's, you've got to be patient to wait for the great deals.
Yeah, it's interesting. So okay. So yeah, I think, so again, I think a lot of the viewers here are, you know, young entrepreneurs, maybe just starting out, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line. So they might have just exited, or they've, they've got a good cash flowing business, that kind of thing. So if they're going out to buy businesses, many people just think that you've got to put down a lot of cash or raise a lot of capital yourself to buy a company. So what kind of other ways can we look at to, take control of more businesses in our portfolio?
Yeah, look, well, I mean, what I did when I first started out is I would find owners who were willing to vendor finance me the business. So I would, instead of paying them cash up front, pay them over time to buy their business from them. And so, that takes a bit of work to talk to people and build trust with them and build rapport with them so that they're willing to do that. But once you learn how to get someone to lend you the money to buy their business from them, you're well on the way to success with that. Vendor finance or owner finance, or owner carries a note, whichever way you do it. But when the owner lends you the money to buy their business from them, the best financing you're ever going to get.
Cool. So obviously, again, one of the focuses of this vlog is to sort of try and showcase the real talk, because I think that a lot of young people, when they're on the internet, they're shown glamour. There's a lot of glamour on Instagram and Facebook, and everyone seems to have both a digital persona and an offline persona, right? So the real talk, Brad, in the sense that, what would you say that was the hardest sort of time for you in business, and what did you do to overcome that?
Oh, look, let me first of all deal with that whole glamour thing. Look, it shouldn't be glamorous in the beginning.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have the fancy car in the beginning, because if you do, it means you're using your cash flow to buy depreciating toys rather than your cash flow to buy investments that then pay for your depreciating toys. So I'll give you a simple example. I wanted to buy, when Rolls-Royce first brought out the drop head coupe, I was like, okay, I want to buy the drop head coupe. At the time, I think it was $480,000 to buy it. There was only 200 of them made in the blue, and there was only 80 in America, and only one came to Vegas. I had to negotiate my butt off to get it, and still paid way over sticker price. So I think I paid 600 grand for the thing. So instead of putting the 600 grand in cash, I went and bought a business that threw off enough profit that would pay for the car. So I went and financed the car, put 600 grand into a business. The business paid for the car. Once the car's paid off, I then still have the business and I still have the car. And so you've got to, I call it churn before you burn. Invest your money and buy your toys off your investments. Do not buy toys with your cash flow. So that, if it's glamorous in the beginning, you're doing it wrong.
I love that. That's great. I think that, again, that's such an important thing for people to hear as well, because what they see is just, amazing lifestyle, and they think, oh, well, I'll make my first 100,000 a year and stick 50,000 into a Ferrari or something, and then they've got the compound effect slows down crazily for them. They don't think about that.
Correct.
So it's really interesting to hear about that.
Cool. You've got to always be doing that. Look, it's very simple. If you're in your 20s, you can be very, very well off in your 40s and live an amazing life. But you've got to work that 10 to 20 years to do that. If every piece of real estate you buy in your 20s is fully paid off, if you take a 20-year loan, it's fully paid off in your 40s, and then you've got 40 more years of freedom to go and do whatever you want. I always say to people, you've got to trade 10 to 15 to maybe 20 years of your life to buy back the rest of your life if you do it right. And this is the thing, buddy. Look, when people come to me about, they all want to get rich quick, and it's like, you don't get rich quick. You get rich over 10 years. It takes that long because you've got to do two things. You've got to learn it, and you've got to be part of at least one boom cycle. If you haven't bought in to one boom cycle, it's hard to be rich. You've got to be in a boom cycle to create wealth. You just have to. It doesn't magically
happen.
Right? Yeah, like there's always going to be the cycle is always going to be there. It's a 7 to 10 year cycle. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. So live with it and be excited by it and use it to your advantage. Now, if I go back to the three things, so business, real estate, and shares, I always teach business first because business is the highest returning asset class there is. If you want proof of that, look at the biggest investors in the planet, the venture capitalists. They're not out buying shares. They're not out buying real estate. They're out buying businesses, whole companies to turn around. Yes, they might buy public companies to buy the shares of them to buy them, but they're out turning around businesses because asset is based on the profitability. And if you can improve the profitability, you improve the value of the asset. So that's first and foremost. Second, I teach real estate because you can still add value, but not to the level of value you can add that you can in business. See, in business, double the value. In real estate, it's very difficult to double the value of a house just by, doing a renovation of the place. It's very difficult. Not to say it can't be done, but it's more likely that you'll add 10 to 30% value through a renovation than it is you'll add 200% or anything like that. And then shares, I always say shares should be third on your list, purely because you can't get wholesale deals in shares until you are a sophisticated or professional investor, and that's by law. That's not a thing. It's the law says you can't participate in wholesale deals until you are at that level. We teach it that way. And the third thing, and the other thing about shares is you can't add value to the share. Yeah. Like if you bought shares in Apple computers, you can't go out and change the value of Apple. You buying a phone won't change its value. Mm-hmm. So speaking of Apple, that's a really interesting set of lessons.
Yeah.
So you bought up 30% by 30% or 30 times, right? Uh-huh. And that's the philosophy of leverage, scalability, marketability, and opportunity. But if you look at Apple, there was a brilliant set of lessons on lack of leverage and then leverage. When Apple started, and by the way, for everyone, my definition of leverage is do the work once, get paid forever, or at least long term, okay? So Apple was making a computer once and selling it once, so it had no leverage. See, it's like a job in most cases. You do the work once and get only paid once, you've got no leverage. Why is real estate great? You buy it once and you get paid forever. I write books. Why? Because I write it once, I get paid forever. Any job I can do once and get paid long term is the job. And that again is the definition of an owner's job, owner's work versus employee's work. I mean, a lot of business people work and wonder why they're not making any more money than their employees. Well, you're doing employee work. I mean, you're not doing owner's work. Owner's work is planning and systems and training staff and hiring staff and, all of the owner's things that pay you back long term. So we go back to Apple. Apple started with they made a computer once, sold it once, and that worked. It was a good strategy when no one owned a computer. But then once everyone owned a computer, it became a tough strategy to win with. So Apple was going bankrupt. Luckily enough, well, actually, if you go back to the early days and compare it, you've got Apple at one end of Silicon Valley and Microsoft at the other end of Silicon Valley. Apple make a computer once, sell it once. Microsoft makes a piece of software once, sells it 1 billion times. Mm-hmm. Bill Gates goes on to become the richest person in the world. Steve Jobs goes to get fired. That's what ended up happening. Steve Jobs, luckily enough, while he was away, went and ran a little company that he sold off to Disney called Pixar, making movies. Now, why did he love making movies? Because you make a movie once, how many times do you sell it? 1 million or 1 billion times. If you look at what he did when he came back to Apple, he moved him into the music business. Why? Well, he's even better than me. How many music? He didn't make any music. He just sold it and took a clip along the way. I mean, there's 30% of every song made goes to Apple for payment. That's a brilliant strategy. Crazy. But you went from a strategy of zero leverage, make it once, sell it once, to a strategy of, don't even have to make it and sell it 1 billion times. Great strategy change. And then apps came along. They didn't even think of that. And then because people were wanting to buy games, they had to invent the iPad so you had big enough screens for games. And then they worked out they could sell TV shows and movies because they had a bigger screen. So many different things. Now they got big screens. Now the TV and all that stuff. Brilliant.
Now the kids have got hold of it, and it's even It's crazy now, eh? They're on it since they were two.
But this is the thing. You went from no leverage to, once you employed leverage, you became one of the 5 largest capitalized companies in the world.
So you're saying that basically leverage is one of the most important things to have as a entrepreneur, to have that mindset or be able to see that when you're starting a company, because if you want that 30x business instead of that 30% growth, you've got to get leverage, right?
You have to. If you don't have leverage, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brad, I'm just going to come to leave that with the end there. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here. It's been really, really insightful just to talk to you a little bit more about it all. I'm sure we could go on and on and on and on and talk about all sorts of stuff. But yeah, thank you again. Thank you very much. I think just to quickly end on a little bit about the Action Coach Foundation, because I know that you guys are focused on, that's all aimed at young people, right? So if you want to just explain a little bit more about that, and then we'll put some info in the description, that'd be great.
Yep. So the aim of the Action Coach Foundation is educating young people in how to be an entrepreneur. So how to be an employer, not an employee, is the essence of what we're doing, because to solve any economic challenge for any country, you have to have employers if you want to fix jobs. Governments can't create jobs, employers create jobs. So, that's what we do. And it's all about educating so people can get sponsored to go and learn that and attend our business school online and learn how to be a business owner rather than an employee. And that's it. So that's part of our passion in life. Keep doing that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you want to go and learn from people that have actually done it instead of people that just say they do it, then check out the Action Coach Foundation, which is epic. So again, thank you guys for listening. If you want to give this a thumbs up and a subscription, then please do. Brad's YouTube channel is also in our featured box on the main channel page. If you want to give him a subscription, that would be awesome too. Thank you very much, Brad.
Take care, buddy. Great to chat.
Good stuff. Bye-bye. I'll just stop the